Thank you so much for joining us here virtually this morning via the Akron Art Museum to discuss the history and symbolism behind Myrlande Constant's DRAPO, which is a current exhibition at the Akron Art Museum. So this morning we are going to talk a little bit more about that history and symbolism, and we have a few guest speakers with here and panelists with us this morning. And we are just going to dive right in momentarily. But just as a reminder, since this is a panel discussion, we ask that you keep all of your screens off and your microphones muted. We will have a Q&A session at the end of our discussion if any of you have any questions about what we're covering here today. We wanted to offer a program where people could attend, whether you are located locally, whether you are coming virtually from further out. We're so happy to have you here today. And to, again, just talk about more of the history behind Drapo as an art form out of Haiti, and then some of that symbolism that we see in Myrlande Constant's work. So if we want to get started, Jerry, I'm going to pass to you for introductions first, if you'd like.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Gabe, for inviting us to be here. I'm really excited to be here with friends, Peter and Catherine, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. So I was just hoping if you could just remind us how long the show is going to be up for, just in case folks want to come and back and see it again. Your exhibition at the museum.
Yes, so we will have it up. Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute there. So it will go until January 4th,
Oh, good.
2026. So we have a little less than a month left to come in and see it. We are open free, we're open late and we're free on Thursdays.
Nice.
I feel
Great.
like
Thank
I
you.
should
Thank you.
also say that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. So my name is Jerry Philogene, and I am professor of Black Studies at Middlebury College. And I was incredibly lucky to work with Katherine Smith on an exhibition 2 years ago, I believe, right? The Work of Radiance, which was a mini solo exhibition of Myrlande Constant. So, thank you all for being here today. I don't know
All
who wants to
right.
go next.
I was going to say, Catherine, if you'd like to go next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I suppose I was invited here today because I co-curated the work of Radiance with Jerry Philogene. Um, yeah, I'm coming to you from England today. And yeah, I've known Myrlande Constant since 1999.
hmm hmm
I spent a lot of time up until the past few years in and out of Haiti, sort of life engaged with Haitian art as both a scholar and a curator and general enthusiast. So over to you, Peter.
All right. And I would like to echo all of my co-speakers' thanks and gratitude at being included in this conversation. I did not curate Myrlande Constant work of Radiance, but the world of visual arts scholars who focus and are related to Haiti is pretty small. So I've had the honor and pleasure of not only working with Catherine and Jerry, but getting a chance to write about their work, including a book review I did a year and a half ago or something on the exhibition catalog for Work of Radiance. But I'm an associate professor of art history at Central College here in Danville, Kentucky, where I am joining you all right now. And oh gosh, I first traveled to Haiti when I was 11 in 1995 and have been more or less involved scholarly and otherwise in the arts since, I guess, shortly thereafter. So I'm happy to be a part of this and continue the conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, all three of you, for introducing yourselves. I'm going to pull up our presentation and we can get started. Kind of starting with the history of Haiti and yeah, just certainly a lot of those colonialization aspects, the unrest that they are currently experiencing as a country. So let me just share my screen here a second and we can get started. Okay, so for this presentation, we wanted to kind of initially talk about obviously Haiti as a country, as it relates to the slave trade, originally happened upon by Columbus in 1492, and it has this history of colonialization behind it. So here is a map of Haiti as a country, an early map of that. Um, but also, so like before colonialization, it was a land of the Taino people. Um, so if we can speak more a little bit about that history and how it kind of developed as a country. Let's see.
Well, Gabe, as you pointed out, Haiti was not known as Haiti at the time. It was Cascaya, but it's where Columbus landed in 1492. And, not just Haiti, but the whole Caribbean is sort of where colonization begins, the European colonization of other places. And as such, or sort of has the longest duration of colonization. Haiti is unique in that it overthrew Napoleon's army at the time, one of the strongest military forces in the world, thereby sort of liberating itself from slavery and colonization and establishing itself as an independent Black nation in 1804. Peter, Jerry?
Oh yeah. I'm sorry. I'm just waiting for you to finish. Yeah. I think that that history of enslavement is an interesting one because even through this whole entire process, there were still individuals, Africans, and now folks born in Haiti who are seeking and thinking about independence and thinking about their freedom. And there's this amazing, amazing book by Michel Wolfe-Trouillot called Silencing the Past. And in one of the chapters that I'm sure folks have read or have taught or there he talks about the ways in which Haitians imagined their freedom. They actually had the wherewithal to understand what it meant to be free people. So therefore, a revolution takes place, an amazing revolution that gets silenced, silencing the past, right? Gets silenced in many historical moments because the idea of enslaved Black people seeking and demanding their freedom was something that could, the colonizers could not even imagine. But not only in Haiti, but also the other islands that made part of the Caribbean. They were part of the Caribbean. So I think there's a wonderful history there that Black people, yes, physically were demanding their freedom, but also they imagined what it meant to be free. And I think that that has always and continues to be one of the guiding forces of Haiti, even through this contemporary moment, the idea that there is a possibility of freedom and we know what freedom looks like and striving for it. So that is, I think, part of the colonial past that is so much part of the present and echoed in many of the works that we're going to see in a few minutes.
And to build off that, and to Catherine started talking about this too, but before Haiti was known as Haiti, it was known as Quisqueya amongst the Tainos and Amerindians. And then when it was colonized by the French, it was known as Saint-Domingue. And after independence was achieved, after, yes, throwing off Napoleon's forces, many of the original founders of the country decided to rename it using Taino language. So Haiti comes from the word Haiti, which means mountainous, and there's a lot of the ways in which that pre-colonial Taino past really factors into, for lack of a better terms, kind of like the early revolutionary imagination and trying to envision itself as a free country outside of a European worldview. And so there was really a lot of leaning into those aspects of the Taino pre-Spanish and French encounter past that really factors into not only the independence narratives, but a sense of Haiti's independence and revolutionary spirit, if you will.
Very cool. I just wanted to pull up this piece
Great.
from our exhibition at the Akron Art Museum. It is the earliest piece out of the 9 pieces we have in
Mm.
the DRAPO exhibition. It is her earliest work that we have, and we wanted to just kind of touch on it briefly because it is the work that kind of focuses on that Tiano that past, that hope, and acknowledging that. This is actually the piece that when you first walk into the exhibition is right up front there on the wall.
Yeah, and you
So
could say that. Sorry, go ahead.
oh no, go for it, Peter.
Well, it was a good segue from what I was just talking about, which is
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
button in a little bit, and that's that often a motif amongst Haitian artists is figures in that Taino past, including Queen Anacaona, who's almost like this tragic figure of resistance who um, she tried to resist Spanish forces. She was the queen of all the different groups, and the circumstances. I'm blurry on the historical details exactly, but essentially she was lured into her own demise,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so she's seen very much as she's included in kind of these pre-revolutionary figures that really does align with and jibe with a sense of like what it means to resist, what it looks like to assert one's own independence, the consequences therein as well. And it's makes perfect sense the fact that Anacaona, the queen, is included. There's many monuments today in Haiti itself that are figural sculptures honoring her. A lot of the place names in the country do refer to some of the Taino Kiskeyan past, if you will.
I mean, I'm really excited that this is the exhibition. This piece is kind of is forefronted in the exhibition because I think, as you mentioned, Gabe, it is one of her earliest pieces, and as Peter rightly mentioned, it kind of it illustrates Anacaona and her importance in Haiti, in its past, in its future. But what I particularly love about it is the kind of Amerindian connections that Constant is trying to make and the way she's trying to bring that out. So it's not just simply a kind of quote unquote Haitian kind of conversation, but she's really thinking about the land. And we see that also in the beautiful flowers that she has incorporated into this incredibly beautiful DRAPO. But at the bottom, we see the Haitian flag, right, which is my left right here, but I don't know if it's where it is for you guys, but you see the Haitian flag at the bottom, and that's a constant. Constant. That's a constant imagery that she has in her work, by including the flag. And I think that's just so beautiful that she's really thinking about here the past, but also bringing us into the present and reminding us not only of the tenacity of Amerindians in Haiti, but also the importance of women in that project, importance of women in that project, which oftentimes in liberation politics and liberatory movements, we tend to negate the role of women in that process. And here she is reminding us once again of the importance of that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for going into some more historical detail about this piece. As I said, it's the forefront of our exhibition. It's the first one that people see when they come in. So kind of moving forward, we are going to start discussing the elements, the history and nature behind voodoo and the imagery that we will see in a lot of her pieces. So here, just on this front slide, to kind of kick us off, these are some examples of voodoo veve or some symbols that you will see in a lot of Drapeau artworks. So this is kind of, I would like to talk more about the history of voodoo in terms of adapting itself under Catholicism, and again, that colonialization and how we kind of see the blending of these two religious structures. especially in terms of like some figures that we see that show up a lot in her work, such as Agwe. I think that's a good place to start. So can we tell our audience members a little bit more about voodoo deities?
Should we rock, paper, scissors this?
Yeah,
I'm so
I'm
sorry.
actually I'm looking at
Everyone's so knowledgeable.
I know I'm looking at my colleagues Catherine and Peter because their work is so grounded, and particularly Catherine's work is so grounded in the religious narrative. So I was looking to you, Catherine, but of course you can't see me
Yeah,
doing
sure. Okay.
that.
Well, okay. So, the first thing to know about voodoo, well, certainly one of the things to know about voodoo when you look at Constant's work is that it has a non-exclusivistic approach to
Mhm.
divinity. So I'm not going to say that it's polytheism, but I will say that, spent years listening to people who serve the Loa, their ancestral spirits. I hear often something like, if something is powerful, why would I give it up to serve something else? Like you can have Jesus and you can have the God of Catholicism. You can also have your ancestral deities that go back to your African ancestors, right? You inherit through your family, and nothing has to be an either or choice. So, there are certainly some people who, like any religion, right? There are schisms and debates, and Catholic figures, especially white-skinned ones, are always controversial and will always get many different opinions. But a prominent, opinion is that, look, these deities that were sort of captured in these images, sure, they're Catholic, but they're also our ancestral African deities as well. And the proof is that their colors align and their symbols align, and people are quick to sort of point out sort of universal aspects of Catholic iconography and say, look, our African religions, they extend through Catholicism, right? And other people say, no, it's a masking that began in colonialism to sort of hide ancestral practices. Um, when I've talked to Constant about the presence of Catholic imagery, she herself has said that she identifies as Catholic as well, and doesn't seem any contradiction in serving both religions. What else to add? I mean, the main thing is that it's not a religion where you sort of go to a church and there's a hierarchy and there's
Right. Yeah.
put down in black and white in a book
Hmm.
what's right and what's wrong.
Hmm.
It's something that's very based in your community, in your family, and you come to know the Loa, the ancestral deities, the moral lessons they provide, their likes, their dislikes, how to serve them, how they can help you. You learn all of these things through knowing them, through your dreams, through going to a ceremony where they may mount a person and speak through, an adherent's body or something like this, through stories that you hear, through songs, through images that circulate as maybe Catholic iconography that's sort of printed and sold on a street corner or seen in a church or painted on a wall. Um, these are all sources of connaissance, of
Right.
religious knowledge, of deep spiritual knowledge that come to you, right?
Right.
But you're not going to have a priest in a church that you go to on Sunday telling you, well, this is what this means, and this is what this means, and this is what this means, right?
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
something that's inside of you or it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted just to pick up very briefly on what you said, Catherine. And I think the idea of connaissance is so important. This knowledge, this body of knowledge that is also passed on through generations, right? It is héritage. It is something that is inherited. And I think that's one of the things that Constant was always so eloquent when she would say to us, and very clear on how how vodou, her practice, was very much part of her family and how it was passed on for her mother, her father, and how she inherited it. And it was um, her job, if you will, to maintain, to nurture, to support the Loire, and that is such an important thing in her project, in her project, but also in her artistic practice. And I think the idea of connaissance is so important. This idea of knowledge, this idea of héritage, but again, oftentimes Vodou's talked about that as this kind of synchronizing of Catholic and its other, and African religions, and I tend to want to push against that because it is really its own kind of religion, its own kind of practice that doesn't necessarily blend anything, but actually just takes into consideration not only African spirituality, but also what takes place in the diaspora, what takes place in Haiti, and how Haiti also becomes such an important part of the creation of Vodou. So I think it's really important for us to think about this connection to family and this connection to a community, because they're so important in the ways in which he talks about this idea. So I just wanted to add a little bit of that to the conversation.
And to talk about sort of the visual characteristics and elaborate a little bit on Vevey from the previous side, those like Catholic saints, the Loire or the spirits have certain visual attributes or even just characteristics about them that seem to like run rather constant, again, haha, through a lot of like the religious practice. And so, for example, you'll see on the top left an alternate spelling for ague, but a boat, a line drawing of a boat, for example. And Ague, his realm is the sea. He has a consort, a partner in the form of La Sirène, who takes the form of a mermaid. And often, as you'll see here, the figure on the far left, that is Ague himself, and he's often depicted like this almost colonial era regalia with epaulettes, a crown often, and this several masted boat, and also alongside, La Sirène, who's emerging from the water there. So there's certain sort of visual ways in which the Loire can get invited into particular ceremonies when they are needed or when they are being called upon. And one of the ways of doing that with the Vevey, which are often during ceremonies, they're invited to join the community by practitioners who will sprinkle these in line drawings on the ground, which are then meant to invite the spirit's presence. Those line drawings will often get sort of trampled or obscured in the dancing and the movements and then the bodily actions that occur therein. But they're a way of bringing, again, building off of what Jerry and Katherine talked about, bringing them into the community and inviting them to participate and make their presence known. And one of the way of doing that is sort of calling on those particular signifiers to which different Loire are associated.
Awesome. Yes, thank you so much. So as you were saying, kind of moving into, can we talk a little bit more? We all talked about this piece a little bit earlier. Again, it's one of our earlier pieces that we have. And in this, we kind of see some of this tree symbolism as this connection between the land and heaven and earth. And in this one in particular, we have it's surrounded by people. Would we be able to talk about some insights into this particular piece?
Okay.
Thank you.
So this work, it shows a processional festival called Rara. This happens after Easter in Vodou, and Rara is fantastic. If you
Speaking as someone who's been in many galas, Katherine.
No, look, if you're curious about this, there's nothing else that sounds quite like it.
Yeah.
If you can't get into a rah-rah band, then try to listen to it. It's a processional festival, and people play vaccine or tambour, these sort of long, simple horns. Some of them are made out of bamboo, which is now often PVC piping, or simple metal horns. But you get a massive crowd of people, and they can get into the thousands, right? All playing these one-note instruments, but as a huge crowd and polyrhythmically. And some are little tiny horns, and some are really big horns. So you get deep and high, and it's like everyone participating, doing this polyrhythmic thing as like a crowd while marching. And there are songs, of course, that are sung. And it's wonderful because, like going to a voodoo ceremony, it is all at the same time like a little bit carnival, like a little bit rowdy. Sometimes the humor gets a little bit colorful and naughty, but it is also at the same time sacred and mystical, and hot, spiritually hot. You get sort of energized and you're dancing. And the area that Constant is from, so she's raised in Port-au-Prince, but her family, her heritage, her ancestral land, her deepest roots are in Léogâne, which is in the Western province. And Léogâne is known for rah-rah. They're known for like having these rah-rah bands that stretch back to the early 19th century, right? And are still going strong. And so these two flags, Rosoli and Réziol, those are two rah-rah bands. They're actual named rah-rah bands in Léogâne. So I've never talked to Constant about this work in particular. I've never even talked to her about rah-rah. I wouldn't be surprised if her family has a band. But, you know, the bands, another aspect to it is this sort of intense aesthetic competition. If you think of like Mardi Gras Indians or something like this, where, you compete, right? And whoever has the most followers, the strongest music, whoever can chauffer bagayo, who can really heat things up, wins, right? And so that's what you see happening here. They've met at a mapu tree, a sacred tree, and you can see that there's things that are going on that are profane, and there's things that are going on that are sacred. It's nighttime, which is when Rara really shifts into gear, right? When the folkloric stuff happens during the day, and then the nighttime things get fun, you know? But that's what this piece is about. And, Constant, we can get into this maybe more later, but she's the first DRAPO artist who really gets into sort of narrative and history. But, this is an early work where she really begins to lay out a scene, And if you get a chance to go into the museum and get up close to this and look at all of the little stories unfolding in this night under this tree, it's really spectacular.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, Catherine, for that read. That's wonderful. And as you were talking, I kept thinking about this beautiful composition, the beautiful composition where we have the mapu tree like right center of the piece, but then it's kind of like also asks acts as a dividing stand, if you will. So we have Uzoli on one side and Iziol on the other. So you have these competitive bands, right, on each
Yeah.
side. But we see all these wonderful, these multi-hued, multi-racial individuals all celebrating, and you can even feel in the dynamism in the image. You can actually feel the excitement, and that's one of the things that I've always found fascinating by Constant's work is that it gives you a sense, it's so visceral, right? You actually feel the tambour, you can actually hear the horns, you actually get a sense of the excitement that's going on, and even the way in which she kind of treats the clouds and the stars. There's such a beautiful simplicity to it, but then underneath you have all this activity happening, this action happening where people are enjoying and engaging on all sorts of polyrhythmic debauchery that is so much part of Gaga. And she celebrates this, right? She celebrates this unapologetically. And that's the other part that I've always loved about her work is that she presents the history, the beauty and the excitement that takes place during Carnaval that is unapologetic. And it is both for the public, but it's also for the voodooists, those who practice, for those who practice. So there are multiple conversations happening in her work, and we see how it changes from the early pieces that were a little bit more simpler and just kind of one, with one image. Here we have so many different conversations happening, and one of the things that we loved about her work, when we were doing this exhibition 2 years ago, is the way in which when you get so close to the work, you can actually see many, many stories, many, many stories. So it's a conversation that, in a way, Constance having with us, right? Having with the viewer. She wants to pull us into the piece and have these various conversations with her. So it requires a very deep strategic looking, and it requires time in front of the work. And that's what I've always loved about it. It requires time. So it's not this kind of quick glance and we walk away, but it's this kind of, okay, let me just sit here for a couple of minutes and come back to it again. And I think that is the beauty in her work.
But don't you want to spend time there?
Absolutely.
And a work like this, I think also like it speaks to the ways in which um y'all were alluding to it earlier, but the ways in which like the human element of this in terms of community and all the different people and the gatherings commingle with the natural world in so many ways. Building off of sort of the image of Agua earlier, the water and the sea has such a significance to the Vodou practice and understandings. Sometimes that's related to, or it's informed by the Middle Passage and the travel of people across, the forced capture of them, travel across the Atlantic, and the amount of people who perished in that journey. Um, is one of the ways in which many Vodouis don't understand that the realm of the dead is below the waters. That's where the deities and the Loa live. That's where the ancestors are. And on a similar note, the landscape, trees, very particular species of trees have some real intense spiritual significance as well. As Katherine said, that's a mapu tree, which is an especially sacred one. In most Vodou ceremonies, there is some sort of vertical element that is meant to unite the unseen world of the ancestors with that in which the living are existing. And it's through those vertical elements that act as thresholds in a way in which that is where the spirits descend and come and join the ceremony and the community. And in certain settings, that can be a literal just wooden pole. But in more rural forms of Vodou practice, that's often around trees and very particular ones. And the Mapu, you can see that right here. You can see it if you look closely, you'll see plates of food and drinks, etc. And those essentially are offerings to the gods, to the spirits, a way of not only inviting them to come and participate, but a way of acknowledging their presence, giving well-chosen foods and drinks that are according to the ones in which the spirits like in particular. And that's all part of like the integrated practice between, the community of the people, as well as like the landscape, the dirt, the botanical qualities, the sky. I love that sky, as well as water and the sea. They're all kind of intermingling. And yeah, this you could spend a lifetime in front of this, in front of a work like this, and just like things will constantly reveal themselves. It's just like so dynamic and gets at what all of my colleagues were talking about.
Thank you so much for sharing about that. That was really, really fascinating and awesome to listen to because again, like there's so many intricacies, not only like physically in this work, but again, those symbolisms, those rituals, those things that we're seeing that as like an outsider, as a white American, for example. I am unfamiliar. And so to hear more about all of these little things that are in these pieces is just amazing. Thank you so much, each of you, for your perspective on that. I'm super excited to go and take another look at it now and spend some more time with it, honestly. Um, so moving on, I think before we kind of get more into Merlande's work itself, just kind of going through a brief history of DRAPO and its space in Haitian culture and kind of how it ties together with a lot of these elements we were just discussing. Um, we kind of have some other examples, again, as we showed our participants some of those symbols of vodou veve, um, some other examples of drapeau artists from Haiti. Um, if we can talk more about culturally, like what is originally kind of the purpose of them, and then moving on into how Myrlande kind of got started in this medium and to where she is now.
I can start with a little bit of sort of the ceremonial background in terms
Perfect.
of drapeau. They are ritual instruments that have been around for a long time in Vodou. In their earliest forms, they were simply like textile flag substrates that would have woven in or sewn in, actual words or veve, those symbols again, and they were not nearly as ornate as Myrlande's versions that we're seeing here, but they were very important. And usually, every Vodou community would have at least two of these that would be kept furled and in sacred places, but then brought out, paraded, and unfurled to invite the particular law that were associated with them at particular points during the ceremony. As is the case with a lot of art forms, there was a lot of outsider interest in them from a very sort of anthropological perspective. Um, that around the late 1970s, early 80s, we begin to see a lot more embellishment and ornate patterning, sequencing, the addition of different materials to sort of enhance the play of light upon the surface of these, and sometimes too those became so ornate as to um disrupt the ceremonial functioning of them. They got so heavy often or so ornate that they were difficult to furl in the same kind of way. And not maybe perhaps coincidentally, at the same time, there was a international buying market that was really became very interested in obtaining a lot of these. And it's a chicken and the egg conversation about what influenced what, but there began to be more heavy beating, more sort of emphasis on the ornamentation of the drapeau that some would say is perhaps in satisfaction of the foreign buying market. But I think that's too simple of a narrative too. That's it's different artists were beginning to explore the possibilities of the medium itself, what it was capable of. I mean, and they would go from being furled and have a very strict ceremonial usage to like the example in my office being like literally put onto a frame. This is by another artist, Debruz Lerisson, who you see the same kind of attributes, like the textures. You can see it's like very thick. You can see the way that light plays off of it as it moves, giving you a sense of like the how when they were brought out in a ceremony, like how dynamic these forms were. And I will let either Jerry or Katherine talk a little bit about sort of Myrlande's entrance to the scene, because it was largely a male-dominated art making community that was involved in making drapeau, and Myrlande and others sort of marked a transition where it wasn't so exclusively gendered.
Um, I just, before we go into Milan, I just wanted to just kind of mention one other thing to follow up on what Peter said. Definitely there were these DRAPOs there were ceremonial DRAPOs that were being created for, for the religious practice. And those were slightly different than the ones that were being created for the market, right? Created for the market, or for the market that was created in the 70s and 80s. So there were and the more ceremonial ones were, of course, honored and sacred, and kept in a specific space. And then the ones that became more commercial, or more used as art practices and art pieces, were of course collected by individuals and taken outside of Haiti. So while there was definitely a growing market in the 70s and 80s, but there were still artists who were and Ougan, and priests and priestesses who were practicing and creating, but not necessarily sharing those drapeaux that they were making with the larger community. So definitely becomes an art practice in the 70s and 80s, but there were also these pieces that were perhaps a little less, they were equally beautiful and symbolic, but not as ornate as the ones that we're commonly aware of in the work of Constant and some of the others that you showed earlier. So, and with Constant, she, as we know, and I'm sure Catherine and Peter can jump in a little bit. She comes out of bringing the heritage, bringing her family's tradition, but also coming out of a wedding dressmaking factory, right? She learns her craft. She learns that beading technique and the craft through working with her mother in a factory in Haiti that made, wedding dresses, wedding dresses. So her introduction to this is through that process. And once she leaves, and she shares this story with Catherine and I, that she left because she felt that she wasn't being paid adequately enough for the work that she was doing. Not only her, but also the other women, mostly, who were doing the work. And she was just like, I can do something else. Tries to figure out what that something else is. I think there's a moment she's talked about, she takes up painting, but doesn't really is excited by that, and then starts to bead and starts to do the work that we know. So it comes out of her own, one, realizing that she has this particular talent, but also realizing her worth, right? The kind of work that she was doing, and the importance of the work that she was doing, and how she can take hold of that and create something, and also share that knowledge and creation and passion with other people. So one of the things that always excites me about her work is that she creates this collective. She creates this process where she's sharing and teaching other people how to also be economically empowered. So there is that one thing, the artistic component, absolutely sharing that artistic component, but then also sharing a component that allows you to be economically viable and sustainable. So, yeah, that's all I wanted to add to that.
I was going to say, I think it's interesting because this tradition of drapeau, like it as an art object, it's always been part of Port-au-Prince. It's a Port-au-Prince based sort of art form, and it's always been connected to industries. The introduction of sequins actually comes in the 1940s under President Estime, who's trying to develop tourism in Haiti. So he invites like a group of Brazilians to come and sort of teach Haiti about how to make a good touristic friendly carnival, right? And it's a particular Ougan who has like a famous rara band, Tibout, in Bel Air, a neighborhood in Port-au-Prince, who begins using sequins first in his rara costumes, which we saw the rara flag drapeau before, right? And you noticed that those two bands were marching under flags. So that's a picture of a flag in a flag. And you see how they're using flags, right? And it was, it was one particular Ougan Tibout, a voodoo priest who began incorporating sequins first into rara costumes and then into drapeau. And when people wanted to buy them, yeah, it became an industry unto itself. And the first sort of well-known generation of drapeau artists who were all men, like Sylvain Joseph and Gar, Telemaque, I believe too, like they were all Bel Air based people who studied under Tibout, who, had a band in the 1940s. But it's Constant who, as Jerry said, came out of working with her mother in a wedding dress factory, who changes the style. And also, the people who began in her workshop were all women, which was new. And now there's women and men and this and that, but there's now been 2 or 3 generations of artists to come out of her workshop, and establish their own workshops and their own signature styles. Yeah, I mean, there is a different style used for, drapeau that are used in ceremonies, but there is also a lot of blending, a flag that belongs to a community, that belongs to a temple, goes through sort of being baptized and being made sacred and then treated as such. But it's humans and spirits taking that action to make it sacred, which means that anything can be made sacred. And there's a circulation of drapeau in and out of the temple. But, as Jerry sort of alluded to, this is a means of sort of economic, I don't want to like self-sufficiency, right? That before Constant, like making drapeau was based within a vodou community. And so, flags are being sold, but the money is going back into the community, right? And with Constant, she's not making drapeau out of an alfor, out of a temple, but it is about a community providing for itself, you know?
And both of you alluded to this too. It's just so interesting the way in which like certain visual arts that are coming out of Haiti that sort of correspond to kind of broader international circumstances regarding manufacturing and industry and the Haiti's place in these globalized circuits. And the wedding dress factory was an example of many that, especially in the 1980s, were part of more larger scale business efforts to make Haiti a place where a lot of assembling occurred, where a lot of different materials will come together from other countries internationally, and then the skilled artisans and craftspeople would do the final assembling with the stitches and the materials, et cetera, et cetera. But it's also a time in which, yeah, in order to get self-sufficient, that those light industries, essentially that doesn't exist in the same way it did in Haiti anymore. And it speaks to, yes, people needing to provide a livelihood for themselves, but also meeting the spiritual and the cultural need that occur within it as well. So there's this kind of, the art piece itself that we see wonderful developments in, and Constant taking a lead in some of those transformations, but they're inextricable from understanding like Haiti's place in the world in terms of global economics, globalization that would occur in the 80s and 90s, and either Haiti's inclusion or exclusion from these circuits, and the ways in which we can understand those better through the development of a lot of the art forms.
Yeah. And I think it's important also to note that around, the 60s, 70s, and 80s was also a high point in tourism in Haiti, a high point in tourism in Haiti. So this kind of back and forth between Haiti and the US, or Haiti and Europe. So these materials were kind of going from place to place. And I think that's really important. And that's why we see the kind of growth and interest in these drapeaux vodou, because of the fact that folks were spending time in Haiti for holiday or what have you, and then, or for other reasons, and then bringing these drapeau vodou back to the States or back to Europe, and there was then this kind of building of an interest. So that kind of transnational and that kind of or international movement is very, very important in the creation of the market, but also in the creation of how these pieces become so important, or as art objects, but also as objects that kind of, in a sense, kind of represent a particular a moment and artistic moment in Haiti.
Very cool. Thank you. So kind of moving through just for the sake of time, here's just some examples of early work, but I definitely want to make sure we spend some time on the work of radiance. Katherine and Jerry, as you have kind of briefly mentioned before in this as well, I think the work of radiance is important because it was her first stateside exhibition ever in this country of her work. And like these two images, for example, one of her first examples of La Sirène and Still Life, these are some of those early work examples that we did see in that exhibition. I'm just going to briefly touch on these two again for the sake of time. Also, these images I was able to pull were not super great, but mentioning that she does have this studio around her and community around her of people who contribute and who also now are have taken this artwork in an avenue for themselves. These are two pieces that we also acquired in addition because of this exhibition, so that we kind of always have one on view, which is really exciting. And you could see like those details, that intricacy. Um, but again, moving into the work of radiance, I just have some pieces here that I pulled. But yeah, if you would both like to briefly talk about like the process around building this exhibition, again, especially because it was the first one here in the States collectively of like her work. Um, as I mentioned earlier, and discovered like all of the pieces in this exhibition for the Fowler Museum, um, that like we don't share any in our exhibition. All of the pieces in here were completely different. Um, and then too, just anything you want to tell about her personally. Unfortunately, and just with being able to contact her or bring her here for this exhibition has been difficult. Um, so yeah, I'm just very excited to hear about how this experience was for both of you.
Yeah. Well, it was we were limited in that it was during the pandemic when a lot of this was coming together. So in addition to the challenges that the security situation in Haiti posed, it was also during the pandemic. So everything was kind of shut down, and a lot of our contact was limited to WhatsApp. Talking to Constant on WhatsApp. And Jerry and I, before we got started, we were just reminiscing about how, things would get really stressful as they get when you're planning an exhibit during a pandemic and there's never enough time or money or whatever. And Constant would always, be like, it'll happen. It'll happen as it's supposed to happen. Like, calm down. Which is a little bit, okay, it's her demeanor, right? That she's tends to be a little bit like, let it be. It will happen if it's supposed to. But it is also an ethos that I think you could call Guinée, which sort of comes from Haitian vodou, that when you push, when you're too ambitious, you run into some morally ambiguous territory. So that there is a sense that things that are meant to be and will happen will happen. You are not as in charge of your fate as you think you are. But you are in charge of your moral choices, and that can affect the outcome of things. So it did happen. There were delays, there were challenges, but it did happen and it was wonderful. And Constant was correct.
Yeah. No, I was laughing because Catherine is so right when she would say to us, it's going to happen in due time. It's going to happen when it's supposed to happen. Because we would call periodically through WhatsApp and sometimes catch her and sometimes not, but we would share with her some of the how the exhibition was going, how the catalog was going, all these things. And as Catherine mentioned, when we were planning this exhibition, it was during the pandemic and also the difficulties that were taking place in Haiti. So it was hard for us to go because we had originally wanted to go there for the summer and spend time with her, interviewing her, meeting her family, meeting the collective that she worked with, and that unfortunately did not happen. But we tried to stay in contact because we wanted her voice. We wanted Constance's voice in the exhibition, and I think. If I'm remembering correctly, when you walked into the Fowler, into the space, we had a quote of hers that said, that connected to, spoke about her relationship with the Loire and her relationship with her mother. And these were the two important things that kind of cultivated her work. So we wanted the audience as they were the viewer as they were walking into the space to see what are the two guiding principles for her project, for her work. And it was her mother and the Loire, and that was really important. And I laugh at that because we tried to get her to come to the exhibition, but for a variety of reasons could not. But there was one time she did come to the States, and just for a brief second, and Catherine and I spent the day with her, and we were interviewing her. And I remember we're driving in a cab in Manhattan, and we're interviewing her, where we're asking her questions about, and she's just saying all these really exciting and important things, and we're just writing these down, and we're just recording and writing these things down. And at the end of the day, I remember saying to Catherine, I'm like, I hope some of these things are going to be useful. Because she would talk about all sorts of things. She'd talk about Haiti, she'd talk about the States, she'd talk about she needs to go shopping and buy things for her family, and why are we holding her up asking all these questions.
Yeah.
So it was this wonderful moment where it was just so there was this wonderful moment where we're just really talking with her, but we're also engaged in just the simplicities of life, of living. She wanted to go shopping. She did not want to talk about this exhibition, okay? She's like,
Yeah,
where can I get belts for under $100? They were like, Macy's, go. So I think that that was one of the moments. I know for me, it just kind of
it's
pulled
true.
back. It's like, this is important for her, but it's not priority. What's priority is her life, living, and we wanted to really make sure that that came through in the exhibition, and and also the catalog was so important for us to have the catalog multilingual. And that was one of the things that when Catherine invited me to co-curate this exhibition, we were so on point on many things, and one of them was that the catalog would be trilingual so that it would be able to appeal to audiences who spoke Creole and those who spoke French and those who spoke English, because that was very, very important for us. So not only to make it an English language project, and also the diversity of conversations about her work. And that's why we included the brilliant writer Evelyn Touillot to give voice into the preface, as well as the performance artist and professor Gina Ulisi, and Emily Boone, who writes about African American photography and Caribbean photography, but really having different voices and different ways to think about Constance's work. So not simply just through the lens of Catherine or I.
Yeah, I mean, you were asking about Constant. I mean, Jerry and I both knew her sort of long before the exhibition. So, I mean, I think, we were nervous about things coming together, but there was a kind of deep preparation in just knowing her and getting her that I think with all the sort of clarity of hindsight, I can see that, like, of course it was going to happen because we had this long-standing relationship with her and we had everything we needed already, right? We had envisioned, like, let's go and we'll talk to her, we'll spend deep time with her, we'll, really spend more time in Haiti, really being so thorough, and it was fine, actually. I like, so the trip that Jerry was mentioning when we did finally get to see her, and it was actually in New York, not in Haiti, and Fort Gansevoort, the gallery that represents her in the US, they had a big sort of press junket for their exhibit they were having, and it's New York Times and all these journalists there, and someone, asked her, like, oh, what is it like being a woman artist? That question. And Constant, she just doesn't answer questions directly. I don't know if she's just going to tell you what she thinks you should know, or like, here's the question you should have asked, or like, here's what you need to hear. But she does often speak in like stories and proverbs. And she was like, you know, avec patience ou praoué, point tete fomia. Like with patience, you will see the nipple of an ant. It was like, next question. It's like, and the translator like didn't translate that exactly. But it was just like such a constant moment where it's like, yeah, well, with patience, things get done, and that's all I'm gonna say about being a woman artist.
Yeah. But I think things get done, but it's interesting. How do you see but it requires, again, going back to what I was saying earlier, this kind of deep strategic looking, because you have to dig deeply to see the nipple of this ant, right? You have to dig very deeply or look
You're not
very
just
deeply.
right.
And
So
that's,
there's work. There's
there's
work,
work,
right?
exactly. There's
There
work.
is work. There is it's a funny thing to
That's right.
like relinquish to work like hell
Yeah,
and also relinquish any investment in a particular end, you know?
exactly.
Like,
Exactly. Yeah, there's work, but there's also close attention has to be paid. So it can't
oh,
be, you know what I mean?
I
Close
mean, yeah,
attention.
you don't make a work like this without intense
Exactly.
attention. Like, and if you had any, I don't know if you have any slides of the backs of the works, but they
Oh,
are in a
yeah.
sense almost as incredible as the front of the work
That's right.
because the stitching is perfect, you
That's right.
know, and it's I mean that's in a very basic level, like the work of radiance, like work had to be in the title because it is
Hmm.
labor. It is all about labor, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's not just kind of like a fatalistic, oh well, hands up, we'll sit around and wait for something to happen. It's like work and things will end up as they should, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. And we wanted to, and Catherine mentioned the back of some of the DRAPO to show the intricate and beautiful stitching, but also in the catalog, we have some images that indicate that. But we also have some images in the catalog, and we wanted to emphasize her drawing because she would draw onto the materials before actually, stitching. And I think that the fact that she's an amazing drawer was also sometimes could be left out of the picture. And we wanted to kind of make sure that that was also emphasized, that her hand was so versatile, was so flexible, and she had this beautiful, way that she would actually draw these images, whether it was the Veve or whether it was the Loire or what have you, but or beautiful skies or clouds. But the fact that she had this artistic ability, or she has this artistic ability to draw, was we wanted the audience and the viewers to really be clear to see the beauty of the work before it actually becomes this work of radiance that we're looking at right now. So that was very important for us to show the breadth of her talents, if you will.
That's awesome. I am really hoping that again the exhibition will be up until January 4th, so we have little less than a month to come in and see it if you haven't. But when it's coming down, I am hoping because that is something that Jeff, our senior curator, has mentioned, that the backs of the drapeau themselves are also just to really get a feel and like the full scope of that intricacy and how they're planned out and the intention behind them is so incredibly neat. Thank you for speaking about your experience. I think for the sake of time, we want to make sure we have some time for Q&A. So I think the last slide that I'm going to kind of focus on is the piece that kicked this off for us as a museum, which is titled Society Rada. Um, and as talking to our chief curator a little bit about this in terms of how we acquired this piece, we had already had that relationship as a museum with Fort Gansevoort through our Michelangelo Lovelace exhibition. So this was the piece that we acquired, and in the efforts to transport it here to get it to us, just for scope and scale for any of our guests who haven't yet seen it. This this drapeau is 8 feet tall by 9 feet wide. This picture really does not do it justice. Any of these images honestly don't really do her work justice. So highly, highly recommend coming to this exhibition in person because it is just absolutely, absolutely stunning. Um, but just to kind of conclude our discussion here, I do know a little bit about the imagery that we see in this drapeau. But if we can kind of talk about Rada specifically and some of these like minor images, especially around the border that we're seeing, and then we'll have time if any of our guests have any questions, we can kind of wrap up a bit there. But yeah, whoever would like to kick off.
Yeah, go see the works in person if you can. Um, so there's different nations in voodoo, and each nation sort of has a different moral stance, a different way of being in the world. And Rada is described, I mean, it's often these things are sort of described in aesthetic terms. So Rada is often described as being cool, right? As being soft, as being sweet. And so it's a nation where the Loa are concerned with family, with reconciliation, with achieving balance, right? With the beauty and sweetness of life, right? And I think that the whole of voodoo acknowledges that there is a lot more to life than reconciliation and sweetness and kindness and purity and wisdom. But that's sort of what Rada is about. It's the moment in the ceremony when the rhythms get sort of slow and soft and the movements become, you know, fluid and lovely, you know. There are others, nation, société that are concerned with justice and fighting and, struggle, and making ends meet. But Rada is like peaceful, kind, sweet. And that's what she's showing here. Like people are seldom understood as, individuals. We're all part of families and communities and hierarchies. And the Loa are exactly the same, right? You don't understand Agwe, who we've talked about a few times, without understanding that he's married to La Sirène, without understanding that he's part of the Nation Rada, that he has this escort, this helper named La Baleine, the whale, right? He's enmeshed in a social world, just like any human. And so this is a société, a society, which is a complicated thing, but a society called Rada.
I do see like especially around the borders, some voodoo veve, especially as I'm kind of noticing here up top is, can we talk just a little bit more about that or some of the imagery that we kind of see around the borders, if we can get a good look at it?
Can you blow it up a little bit? Is that
Yeah,
possible?
it's
So we
kind of
can
small. I
just
was
so
gonna
we
get
can
real close to my computer
yeah, I
screen
was like,
here.
I don't want to get so
Let
close
me
to the
see. No,
is it
that's
possible?
that's fair.
Because I would think that I would think that the Veves are the Rada Lois. So yeah, just to mark them, but I can't really tell from the image too
Let
well.
me see if I can
I
find
mean, I can say
one.
if you're having a ceremony for Rada spirits, then you want to bring in all the different
Hmm.
ways, all the senses to sort of invite them and welcome them.
Right.
Right.
And putting a veve on the floor around the center post, the
Hmm.
potomitan, is one of the key things that you do, right? It's like an embossed
Mhm.
invitation. And so she's done this in a few pieces where she frames the piece as almost an invocation, a visual invocation for the Loa.
Gotcha. That's awesome.
Right.
Okay, here, let me see if I can find
But
some
in the
really
work,
quick
you
that
also
will
see
allow
kind
me
of a
to.
framing within a frame, so she kind of like it's
Yeah.
doubly framed, which I also find kind of really interesting the way she does that. And the materials are different. So the senses are different.
Mhm.
Materials are different, whereas fabric and the other becomes a little bit more textured in terms of the beading and all that. So that is also that's a beautiful process that she's also has kind of included in her work as the scale of the work has increased and the vignettes have gotten more complicated and complex. And that's really important also to
Mhm.
note.
Well, let me see if I can get a little closer with this here.
Oh,
Can
okay.
everybody see that a little bit here?
Yeah.
That's beautiful, isn't it?
Okay.
Okay, that's beautiful. Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah. And I love it also. She has these Haitian flags, like the flags are so again important in her
Yeah.
in the work.
Yeah, it's fascinating seeing this work up close and seeing
Hmm.
that you have these little separate pockets and these separate
Hmm.
spaces of imagery here that is
Hmm.
just so
Yeah.
incredibly neat.
Yeah. And as Peter had mentioned earlier, this kind of bringing together of the human beings and animals, so this kind of coexistence, if you will. So there is this kind of symbiotic relationship between nature and the human world, which I think is so, so important. And we see, the gambala in the form of the snake. You see right in the middle there. You see the two snakes kind of intertwined, wrapping
Right
around a
there.
cow. I think I'm seeing a cow.
Hmm.
So all of those kinds of presence are very, very clear that the Loas are present in this piece as well, indicated by the veve, but also by the iconography as well.
And with all of Mirlande's work, and especially this one, there is a way in which it is emblematic of a lot of like larger, big picture understandings of the world and spirits that you see
Hmm.
going on here. And that is
Hmm.
like there's this commingling of like
Yeah,
the ethereal and the heavenly
yeah,
and the realm of the spirits and the ancestors. It's
yeah.
almost indistinguishable and
Hmm.
very much a part of like the presence of a recognizable earthly realm, and that really does correspond to the way that the spirits are envisioned and understood in Vodou practice itself. It's like
Hmm.
these aren't these like remote beings of some omnipotent god in the sky who's seemingly inaccessible. It's that with the proper embossed invitation and in the form of dances and veve and drum beats and certain particular songs, like the spirits are right here with us like all the time, and there is little distinction between the earthly realm and that of where the spirits and the ancestors live too. That just really comes forth in a lot of, especially Mirlande's later work, but ones like this example we're seeing here.
What pops into my head as we're talking now? Like we're seeing, this is obviously the time of the year when we're seeing a lot of nativity scenes, right? And like, why do we need to see baby Jesus with a mother and a father? And what does being surrounded by animals tell us about his place in a hierarchy? And what's the deal with the celestial scene going on above with the stars? Like it's not such a strange and bizarre religion to think of voodoo, of these Loa that have families and are surrounded by animals and celestial miracles and things like that, right? We're seeing it on every street corner right now.
And also as we've been mentioning, there's also the celebratory pattern here, and we see a celebration of the goods that the earth brings to us, and we see with the plate filled with food that has been nurtured by the ground, that has been nurtured and culled by the people, and we're celebrating the Loa by offering them what they have offered to us. And I think that kind of richness in her work, where she indicates the richness of the earth, the richness of the land, is so counter to how we imagine Haiti, how Haiti has
Right.
been presented in the so in media, right? And that she pushes against that. She pushes against that and offers us a different look, a different way of thinking about Haiti as this space of richness, even though what we know, what we see, or what we hear about it in social and media is something very, very different. And there's a beautiful piece that we had in the exhibition, her earthquake piece, which again is a amazing, amazing piece of work. But one of the things that the work Catherine and I really loved about that image was the way in which it also countered how we the stories that we heard about the earthquake in Haiti, the horrible, horrible earthquake in Haiti, where we heard that people were, yes, dying, but we also did not hear oftentimes how they were being rescued by other Haitians, by Caribbeans, by other communities, how they were being rescued and supported and taken care of. And in that piece, in that drapeau that she does, we see that. We see a lot of the vignettes that she includes in that drapeau are Haitians helping Haitians during this very, very devastating time. So one of the things that I've always loved about her work is that she pushes against the kind of negative narratives that has been told about Haiti and offers this richness, this beauty that exists, yes, in the contemporary world, but also in the other world, as Peter mentioned. And I that's what I always leave with when I look at her work is that there is such beauty and such existence in what we, in how we understand Haiti.
She shows us images of abundance, you
Yeah,
know?
that's right.
And it's such a good cognate that you get, or an analog that you gave, Kathy, about like the Christmas season. I mean, it's essentially a holiday about birth and life and abundance and joy that's placed in the middle of the deepest of winter when the harvest is long over and the spring is a far away thought. And I think it's just like that's just a very apt parallel to what we're seeing in
Well,
terms of the state of what the visuals we see here, like in contrast or contradistinction with, Haiti's current challenges.
these pictures show gift giving, right? And that's not any different than the gift of the Magi, right?
Yeah.
There's so much stigma around voodoo and sacrifice and this and that. But at the end of the day, it's about gift giving, right? Sharing the resources. And it shouldn't seem that foreign.
Yeah.
It shouldn't, right?
Thank you so much. I absolutely loved that. Um, so we have a few minutes left if we want, if anybody in our audience has any questions for Peter or for Jerry or for Catherine. Um, I have, if anybody would like to turn their mic on and ask a question or put it in the chat while we still have some time left, I'd be happy to read those off if you want to put them in the chat. Or again, turn your mic on.
Oh, hello. I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Thank you, Martha.
Oh, okay. Yes. So, oh my God, I'm so fascinated. And I did see the exhibit on Wednesday, and I am gonna go again and see it again because I'm just like so amazed. But anyway, to the panel, I wanted to thank you for all these insights and ask you if you have any recommendations about sort of what to read for what I am interested on is how Haitian voodoo, like Cuban Santeria and Brazilian Candomblé, are religions of embodiment. Like there is this anthropologist Yvonne Daniel who writes about them as these religions of embodiment, and how if there is anybody who has written about the process of sort of the transmission of the knowledge from Africa and to Haiti in particular. I mean, this is something that is really hard to research, but if there is any book that you have any suggestions about that, how is the knowledge transmitted? And I know that voodoo is not just influences from one part of Africa. There are many. But anyway, that's my question. Thank you.
Where to start? I'm gonna go to my bookshelf.
Also, too, panelists, feel free to also include it in the chat. And Martha, if you'd like to, any suggestions, if you're unable to write them down, I'd be happy to share with you as well and write them down and send them to you. Because we are
Yeah,
recording
that'd be
this. So
great.
it looks like Catherine's got one.
I think, okay, there's so many good things to read. I guess the first thing that I read on Haitian voodoo was Maya Deren's Divine Horseman, which is something that, was written in, I think, published originally in 1953. So there are a lot of things about it that are quite dated. But, it's one of the things that inspired me to go to Haiti. And she most certainly talks about connaissance, about knowledge and embodiment. But if you're not an academic and you don't feel like stomaching a lot of academic language, then Nandormi, which I can write in the chat, by Mimrose Beaubrun, who is a scholar, an activist, and best known as the sort of co-lead singer of Boukman Experience. It's one of the Haiti's premier voodoo rock band. But this is her memoir about her own spiritual journey as a student of a great mambo, a great voodooism. And it is, I mean, the word that comes to mind is like very psychedelic. It's sort of it's a memoir of her dream life, kind of, and her exploration of the world of the spirits as guided by her own mentor. So that's been translated into English and is available from independent bookshops or Amazon. I don't see the chat here, but what do you guys think?
I mean, it's sort of low-hanging fruit in terms of like academic scholarship, but one of the foundational works that it is itself a little bit dated, challenging, not without its own controversies, but it does it's a wide scope of of Afro-diasporic practices in the Atlantic world and their adaptations and transformations across the waters, etc. But Flash of the Spirit by Robert Farris Thompson, it talks not only about Haiti, but practices that are derived from the Congo that exists in the southern United States, for example, as well as other sort of embodied practices that may have gotten short shrift or dismissed in prior versions of art history, but that Thompson really brings together in a way that it's a quirky to say the least in some of like his language and phrasings, but it's
And
a
the scope
broader
is,
scope too.
yeah.
I'm actually not I'm in my home, so I don't have home office. I have more catalogs than anything. But I'm thinking of three scholars who my colleagues, I mean Peter and Catherine also know. Patrick Bellegarde-Smith's work. I'm thinking of Claudine Michel's work, and also another art historian, Kira Daniels, who I believe is at Emory. They're writing, she's writing some amazing work. So I think the three of them, those three individuals, would definitely in their works, particularly Bellegarde Smith and Michel, have amazing materials that would speak to some of the issues and questions that you have, Martha. So yeah, I can put them in the chat if you'd like.
I'd say Kira Daniels, especially if you follow her on social media, she's often sort of speaking publicly, and you can
Yeah.
catch her online at least a couple times a year. I would also suggest.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
It's a
Yes, yes.
doorstop, but it's a good one.
Yeah, I think it's gotten to be quite expensive at this point, finding
Oh,
it on
right.
eBay.
Really?
But this was a really,
Yeah.
this book was the catalog that came out of an exhibition at the Fowler Museum,
Right.
and was definitely one of the things that, like, you know, I read it when I was 19, and then by age 20 was living in Haiti. So it's like,
Can you put it up one more time so I can type it up? Sacred Arts.
The Sacred Arts of Haitian
Yeah,
Voodoo.
yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. Just want to make sure I got the right thing. Okay.
So
Thank you, Catherine. I wrote in the chat.
a lot of these chapters you can now find online as PDFs for free, because I think they're going for like $150 or $200 online.
There we go.
So, but that's a great history of all the visual arts, and really the top scholars that were writing in 1995.
Yeah. It's a beautiful catalog. It's a beautiful catalog.
It's gorgeous.
With wonderful images, yeah. And good essays, and great essays too. Yeah.
Great essays, yeah.
Yeah.
That's like, yeah, Michel Ralph Trio has something in there. Like, it's all great.
So too, that could also, like, you know, if it's Martha being interested in, what I'm hearing is a great catalog or things to have to also find like further articles and books for discussions and things like that to kind of kick you off. Thank you for sharing those resources. Again, I will email those out, any resources that we have that have been put in the chat in case anybody needed to write them down. Does anybody have any more questions before we depart?
I will also plug Jerry and Catherine's more latest exhibition catalog, which should be slightly less expensive, but they're maybe too
It's at our
modest.
shop.
But yeah, the
We're
work
selling
already,
it at our shop.
it is fantastic, and it itself has some really great essays in there and reproductions. And I'm not just saying that because I'm sharing a stage with two of the essayists, but it is a fantastic accomplishment, and that's a great place to start if DRAPO is your entry point.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you,
Yes.
Peter.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Peter.
It's very kind of you. Yeah. And Peter wrote a wonderful review of the catalog. So thank you so much.
I got intimately connected with it. So
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And also the
Love
work
it.
of Patrick Polk, who also has an essay in the exhibition catalog, but Patrick Polk's work.
I mean, he has the distinction of having essays in both books.
yes,
That's right. That's correct.
There you go.
That's correct. So his work was foundational to, I know when I was doing research and writing my essay, but also incredibly helpful. So yeah, Patrick Polk is another person who I wanted to mention.
Wonderful. Oh, that's so awesome. Well, thank you so very much for being here today, especially on like a snowy Saturday morning. I'm glad we were able to do this virtually.
Yeah.
To our guests attending virtually, thank you so much for being here. Again, my name is Gabe Kushner. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about any of our sessions here. But yeah, that concludes our virtual panel discussion on Haitian symbolism and history in Myrlande Constant's work.
Yeah.